One of the ladies that died, I know, I'm just hoping that that is not right.
Witnesses say the gunman was a white male. He was wearing military-style clothes and a helmet with a camera.
I was hearing that shooting after shooting after shooting. It went on about 6 minutes or more, and I could hear screaming and crying, and I saw some people were, drop dead.
Linwood Mosque, about 10 minutes drive away in another part of the city, was also attacked shortly after the shooting at Al Noor. Police say they have suspects in custody, but there may be more on the loose. They're warning people to stay away from mosques across New Zealand.
We are pouring resources into that area. Every available Canterbury and staff member and people nearby, other emergency services also, saturating that area with visibility to ensure that everyone who needs to get home can get so safely.
New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said this is one of her country's darkest days.
There is no place in New Zealand for such extreme acts of unprecedented violence. The people who were the subject of this attack today, New Zealand is their home. They should be safe here. The person who has perpetrated this violent act against them, they have no place in New Zealand society.
This footage published online reportedly shows a suspect being arrested after the shootings. Police say they've also found bombs attached to several cars, which have now been disabled. Victoria Gatenby, Al Jazeera.
While the former head of the Al Noor Mosque, Mohammed Jama, spoke about his first-hand experience with the shooter.
The time is 1:40 p.m. I'm the area in front near the gate, first gate, and he coming to pass one person, and he have short man, 160 meters, and he have helmet, and he have given the glasses, and he is a dress of the military, and he is a gun, machine gun of the M16 plug one, and it is a seat belt of the another gun, bullet, and he passed. I say, hey, what are you doing? And not talk me. He looking and not talk me. He is starting. He starting shooting, and the people of the changing the shoes and the shooting, and me, I'm running. That's after that he go the inside and he go one by one. Everybody killing, and some people died.
All right, we want to take you back now to Wellington in New Zealand, where the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern is once again addressing the media. Let's take a listen.
Tonight, we believe that 40 people have lost their lives in this act of extreme violence. 10 have died at Linwood Avenue Mosque, 3 of which were outside the mosque itself. A further 30 have been killed at Deans Avenue Mosque. There are also more than 20 seriously injured who are currently in Christchurch A&E. It is clear that this can now only be described as a terrorist attack. From what we know, it does appear to have been well planned. 2 explosive devices attached to suspects' vehicles have now been found and they have been disarmed. There are currently 4 individuals who have been apprehended, but 3 are connected to this attack who are currently in custody. One of which has publicly stated that they were Australian-born. These are people who I would describe as having extremist views that have absolutely no place in New Zealand and, in fact, have no place in the world. While we do not have any reason to believe at this stage that there are any other suspects, we are not assuming that at this stage. The Joint Intelligence Group has been deployed and police are putting all of their resources into this situation. The Defence Force are currently transporting additional police staff to the region. Our national security threat level has been lifted from low to high. This, I want to assure people, is to ensure that all our agencies are responding in the most appropriate way. That includes at our borders. Many of you will have seen that Air New Zealand has cancelled all turboprop flights out of Christchurch tonight and will review the situation in the morning. Jet services both domestically and internationally are continuing to operate. I say again, there is heightened security. That is, of course, so we can assure people of their safety, and the police are working hard to ensure that people are able to move around their city safely. I have spoken this evening to the Mayor of Christchurch, and I intend to speak this evening to the Imam. But I also want to send a message to those directly affected. In fact, I'm sure right now New Zealand would like me to share a message on their behalf too. Our thoughts and our prayers are with those who have been impacted today. Christchurch was the home of these victims. For many, this may not have been the place they were born. In fact, for many, New Zealand was their choice, the place they actively came to and committed themselves to, the place they were raising their families, where they were part of communities that they loved and who loved them. It was a place that many came to for its safety, a place where they were free to practice their culture and their religion. For those of you who are watching at home tonight and questioning how this could have happened here, we, New Zealand, we were not a target because we are a safe harbour for those who hate. We were not chosen for this act of violence because we condone racism, because we're an enclave for extremism. We were chosen for the very fact that we are none of these things, because we represent diversity, kindness, compassion, a home for those who share our values, refuge for those who need it. And those values, I can assure you, will not and cannot be shaken by this attack. We are a proud nation of more than 200 ethnicities, 160 languages, and amongst that diversity we share common values. And the one that we place the currency on right now and tonight is our compassion and the support for the community of those directly affected by this tragedy. And secondly, the strongest possible condemnation of the ideology of the people who did this. You may have chosen us, but we utterly reject and condemn you.
Prime Minister, how did the perpetrators of this slip under the radar of the SIS and the GCSP?
What I can inform you of this time that those that, as far as I'm advised, currently in custody were not on security watch lists. That I'm sure will be a question, as if they were known from a security perspective, and they were not on any active watch lists. Of course, the police are currently questioning those in custody, so beyond that there's not too much more I can say at this time.
Is that good enough that they weren't on watch lists? Was this preventable?
I think that gives you an indication there, at least from that in that regard, is they weren't on watch lists, so it's not a matter of someone having slipped under the radar. Again, though, it is early days. That's the assurance I can give people at this time. People are in custody, obviously being questioned. The Commissioner of Police will be giving an update again, roughly somewhere between 8 and 8:30. Those are questions that perhaps you can put to him again.
Has there been too much attention on Muslim terrorist risk rather than white supremacy?
I think we should be vigilant against the idea of extreme ideology and extreme violence and violent acts.
The agency's been putting too much of their focus on one sector of the risk.
You'll notice from the language that you hear from those who work in our intelligence and security services that their focus is on extremism, regardless of where it comes from. We need to be blind in that regard. It needs to absolutely focus on threat and ideology and extremism, because obviously that is what we have experienced here today.
Is this a new era in New Zealand where our innocence is gone?
We have undoubtedly experienced an attack today that is unprecedented, unlike anything that we have experienced before. But as I say, New Zealand has been chosen because we are not a place where violent extremism exists. We reject those notions and we must continue to reject them. This is not an enclave for that kind of behaviour, for that kind of ideology. We will and must reject it. This is a place where people should feel secure and will feel secure. I am not going to let this change New Zealand's profile. None of us should.
Prime Minister, if they weren't on the intelligence agency's watch list, why not?
Obviously, Barry, it's an indication to you that they had not acted in a way that warranted it. Again, though, feel free to ask further questions. At this time, I'm not in a place to give you additional information beyond that.
So you'll be talking presumably...
Claire. Sorry, Barry, taking a question from Claire.
Have you had any information from Australia about whether they were on watch lists in Australia or what the one who has said he was born in Australia?
My understanding at this stage is that they weren't on watch lists. Again, I don't want to go too much beyond this. It is early days. You'll also understand I won't want to jeopardise the case that may be taken in the future as well. I do also want to acknowledge that I have been contacted by Prime Minister Scott Morrison. I intend to speak with him directly as soon as I'm able.
Advice about the risk profile.
Not at this stage, but certainly the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Prime Minister of Australia have contacted the Deputy Prime Minister and myself.
Can you give us a sense of the age of the victims?
Not at this stage. I will have been amongst other members of the public who will have seen the footage as the injured were being brought to Christchurch A&E, and you certainly can see from that footage there is a real range of ages there. I imagine that these would have represented particular brothers, fathers, sons. I haven't had a breakdown at this stage. Sorry, it's not information I can share.
What is your advice at the moment about the
The
risk?
Australian man has a very, we are known, he has a very prevalent online presence, and it seems like it's been, steamed back for a couple of weeks. How is it not that they have not been put on the watch list?
Again, these are obviously questions that at this point I'm unable to give additional details on. Obviously, though, that offender is in custody now, so I can give that assurance he has been apprehended. He is also accompanied by 2 other associates. He is being actively questioned, obviously. These may be additional questions that you could put to the Commissioner of Police.
Questions that you're asking of your
Obviously,
agencies?
Absolutely. Again, as I say, I've given you the advice they've given me about watch lists, but obviously these are absolutely questions that we'll be asking, including access to firearms.
What is your advice about any ongoing risks in either Christchurch or other centres, and what is the advice to people out there who still might be very worried about the situation?
At this stage, I'm certainly asking people to continue to follow the advice of the police. Yes, we have apprehended, there have been 3 individuals apprehended. However, the police aren't taking for granted that there may well be others that may need to be brought into custody. They've got no reason to expect that, but they haven't ruled it out. So please, in the meantime, continue to listen to police advice. But I also want to give assurance to people. The police are obviously incredibly active on the ground. They are bringing in additional police officers. The Defence Force are bringing them down. So just listen to the advice that's available to you. But we are ensuring the security of those who are moving around in Christchurch at this time.
The 4th person that was arrested, Prime Minister, you say this one principal had 2 associates.
Yes.
The 4th person, what have they?
They're not connected. They're not directly connected to the attack.
Arrested in Christchurch?
Sorry.
Are all the arrests in Christchurch?
That is my understanding, yes.
Can you tell us why they've been arrested?
In connection to the attacks today, or the individual that wasn't. That would be a question for Commissioner Bush. I'm not sure if that's something I'm able to share, but they're not anyone who is a threat to the public.
Think about the relationship of those arrested have to one another. Do they share the same ideology, or what is their...
Certainly that is the assumption that I would make at this stage. We've seen from one of the offenders that they have publicise their ideology. I have no reason to assume anything other than that those others who have been arrested would subscribe to the same ideology, which I can only describe as
Are they New
extreme.
Zealanders?
What's your plan for visiting?
I'm not in a position to give away additional details on their citizenship at this stage, Barry.
Is there anything else about the IEDs, what they were, how they were disarmed, and whether there's any risk that there could be further?
You know, at this point, I think that's an opportunity to really acknowledge the work that the police are doing. You know, the apprehending of a suspect in an extremely volatile situation, really putting themselves at risk on our behalves, and I want to acknowledge that. Particularly also disarming the explosives that were, as I understand, attached to the suspects' cars. There were 2 of them. They have been disarmed now, but obviously that was a high-risk situation. Gives us an indication that there was a degree of planning around what has happened today.
Was there an intention for a suicide attack?
I cannot speculate around what the intention was, but again, it was attached to the suspects' vehicles.
The IEDs being out there?
Not at this stage.
Attached to an individual.
Yes.
A message for anybody who, and the media around the world who are sharing that video or watching the live stream?
Look, my message would be, you know, we should not be perpetuating, sharing, giving any oxygen to this act of violence and the message that sat behind it. We should all be condemning, obviously, what has happened here today in the peaceful nation of New Zealand. And what all of us can at least do is ensure that we do not share, spread, or actively engage in that message of hate. We have been given assurance that online, at least those platforms where some of those images have been shared are actively being removed. But I just ask people, don't share them.
Can we still call ourselves a peaceful nation?
Yes. This is not who we are. This act was not a reflection of who we are as a nation. That is why so many New Zealanders, every New Zealander, I imagine, will be shocked by this today, because this isn't who we are. You know, this is something that all of us will utterly reject. And of course, it will take time to heal. And tonight our thoughts and our prayers need to be with those affected. But I'm sure, of course, that all of us want to retain the identity we have as a nation, because that's why those who live here live here.
Prepared as Prime Minister for this to happen in New Zealand?
Of course, our agencies always need to be prepared. We need to be vigilant. We need to ensure that if we have an act like this on our shores, that we respond quickly to give assurances to the public that we can protect them and that their safety is top of mind. So we are always prepared. Are we personally prepared for these things to happen? An event like this, of course, is always a shock, but for our agencies, we were ready.
In other countries around the world where they've seen attacks like this, there have unfortunately been copycat attacks or kind of follow-up attacks. Is that a concern in New Zealand?
We must always be vigilant. Obviously, we've lifted our threat level from low to high. That's, of course, so that we can continue to give assurance to the public around their safety. It means we've heightened our response from our agencies at the border, at the airport. In fact, at every level, we have a heightened response. And again, that's so we can give that assurance of safety to the public.
Were our agencies doing enough in the lead up?
Certainly, as I say, of course, events like this, we always have preparations in place. And of course, we'll always be working to ensure that we've adequately responded.
Christchurch.
Yeah, I'm very keen to travel as soon as I can, but of course within reason, taking advice from the police around when I can do that in such a way that doesn't interfere with their operational work. My hope is that at the very latest that I'll be down there tomorrow.
Prime Minister, you said that you'd heard from Scott Morrison. Are there any world leaders around the world that have contacted you in the wake of this attack?
Look, some of that may have come directly to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, but at least I know directly, certainly from Australia at this stage. Often messages are conveyed via social media as well, and I'm sure everyone would want to thank them for their thoughts and their offer of assistance.
Confirm that there was an IRD at the hospital, whether there were any shots fired or whether that was ever a shooting scene?
No, I haven't had any information that that confirms that at all. No.
That there was an IED found on an individual?
No, I cannot confirm that. Do feel free to put that question to the Commissioner.
Prime Minister, presumably you'll be having more meetings with our intelligence agencies to find out just what went on and why these people were missed. When are you going to be meeting with them again?
Look, I expect I'm likely to reconvene with them again this evening. You'll appreciate, Barry, that at the moment our immediate response is on ensuring the safety of those in Christchurch, ensuring that the police have everything they need from an operational perspective to secure the areas and be assured that everyone who should be in custody is, acknowledging that they have moved extremely quickly to have those individuals already in custody. Of course, we will continue to look at the details around the suspects and every element of this attack, but tonight it's about securing the safety of others.
Can you please clarify how many gunmen or gunwomen there were in this attack?
At this stage, again, as I say, 3 have been arrested. We have no reason to suspect at this stage there were others, but we haven't obviously ruled that out at this stage.
Did they all actually use firearms?
I cannot give you 100% assurance of that, but certainly all 3 are connected.
Will you be getting any additional security, or will there be any additional security at the Parliament?
Look, at this stage, obviously, I'm one of the members of Parliament that always has a security detail with me. Obviously, at the moment that we were informed of this situation, there was a slightly heightened presence, but I expect that soon that will probably resume back to my normal presence.
Just back on the previous question, it was separate offenders at Linwood and Hagley?
It was separate offenders who, look, I can't give specifics around who was directly involved at each mosque, and nor am I sure at this stage that that's detail that we're sharing. Do feel free to put the question to the Commissioner, though.
Can I just clarify?
Yes.
You might have answered this before, but police didn't have these people under active investigation or had them were aware of them?
That is my understanding.
Kiwis across New Zealand who want to do something for the Muslim community currently.
Sorry, what?
Community advice to the Kiwis across New Zealand who want to do something for the Muslim community currently.
At this stage, advice has been given to those who would usually wish to worship at their local mosque, that for the time being they're being asked to just not to congregate there. But in time, my hope would be that the outpouring of compassion and support that I know New Zealanders will want to show it to them. Show it to the members of the community who sought to worship safely and who were the victims of this attack today. And I know New Zealanders will want to do that.
Hannah is Australian born, but do you know how long he has been in New Zealand?
My understanding that it is a relatively short period of time since last entry into New Zealand. Again, I don't want to get into too many details around that because that's still an emerging picture.
Is the nationality watch list we do know that he didn't have any prior convictions?
Sorry.
So if he wasn't on
what I'll say at the moment is that they weren't on a watch list. Again, I'm cautious around how much more I say, given that we have individuals in custody and I don't want to jeopardise the case. But that may be detail that the Commissioner may be willing to share. All right, everyone. Look, I'll look to reconvene and give you any additional insights I can tomorrow. We'll be keeping everyone updated. My plan is to get to Christchurch as early as I can and as soon as the police are happy for me to do so.
The bomb scare at Britomart, do you know if that's connected in any way?
No, I certainly can't confirm that. That's nothing I've been briefed on. We'll make sure that the Commissioner is able to give you information as soon as possible. Thank you, everyone.
New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern addressing reporters there for the second time this Friday after an attack in Christchurch, New Zealand, an attack on 2 mosques. Jacinda Ardern saying that 40 people have been killed and 20 others injured in the mosque shootings in Christchurch, shootings that she has described a terrorist attack. Let's speak to Kushla Norman now, who's a journalist on the line from Wellington for us, who was listening in to what the Prime Minister had to say. Tell us more about what the Prime Minister revealed about these attacks in Christchurch.
Well, as you say, Folly, she did reveal those shocking numbers, which I think has probably come as a real shock to all New Zealanders. 40 dead. This would have to be New Zealand's worst terrorist attack. 10 killed at the mosque in Linwood, that's to the east of Christchurch. 30 killed at the more central mosque, the bigger mosque, where about 500 people had gathered for Friday prayers. Jacinda Ardern, she said this was clearly a well-planned terrorist attack. She said that 2 explosives had been found attached to cars, and these had been detonated. 4 people have been apprehended, but 3 are arrested in connection to the attack. It sounds as if there was the gunman who burst into the central mosque in Christchurch, and then he had 2 accomplices. We know that one of the gunmen, his name is Brenton Tarrant. He's an Australian, and we're unsure. The Prime Minister wouldn't say any more about what the citizenship might be for the other attackers.
She said that the national threat level had been lifted from low to high. What does that mean as far as the security then across the country? What is going to change from now?
Well, I think the reason she's done that is so that our borders can be more secure. New Zealand has traditionally had a very low security threat. This is obviously a huge and unprecedented attack, so it's probably no surprise that the security level has been increased. We know that these attackers, alleged attackers, they were not on any watch list, any intelligence watch list, and she'll pursue more information about why that was the case. But she did confirm this was definitely a planned attack.
As the Prime Minister said, Kushla, as the Prime Minister said, this really is unprecedented for New Zealand, a truly shocking moment for the people there. Tell us more about the reactions. The Muslim community was targeted today in these attacks. What are people saying? You know, how are they expressing their sympathies?
Yeah, people are incredibly sad and shocked. They thought that this would be something that they would never see in their lifetimes in New Zealand. The Prime Minister, she said, there are 200 ethnicities in this country, 160 languages. We're a country of kindness and compassion, and what happened today does not reflect who we are. I was speaking to a Syrian family a couple of days ago who have just moved here, and they say that New Zealand has been a welcoming and friendly country, and people are utterly shocked. They're gathering in prayer, individuals, the Christian community and Muslims praying together to get through this incredibly shocking time.
The suspects have been identified as 3 men and 1 woman, one of them being an Australian national, and we had that confirmation from the Australian Prime Minister, and he said that Australia was going to be involved in the investigation somehow. Do we know, a bit more about that?
I'm afraid I don't. New Zealand and Australian police often share information, and I'd imagine that this will be a pretty big inquiry to get to the bottom of these people, how they orchestrated this, how they obtained these semi-automatic weapons, and how it relatively went under the radar.
Kushla, just remind our viewers now who are joining us. I mean, this is a breaking news story that we've been covering for the past few hours here on Al Jazeera. The pictures that we're looking at right now is of the arrest of one of the suspects in these shooting attacks in Christchurch. Remind us of what we heard from the Prime Minister. The death toll, a very high one.
I'm sorry, could you just repeat that?
Just a reminder for our viewers who are joining us of what's happened in Christchurch this morning. And the death toll was just confirmed a short while ago by the Prime Minister, and it's a very high death toll.
It is a very high death toll. We were told it was going to be significant, and I think 40 deaths, people are going to be incredibly shocked to hear that. This all unfolded just before 2 o'clock this afternoon. It was Friday prayers, and Muslims were congregating at 2 mosques in Christchurch, a big one in the centre of the city and then a smaller one. A gunman, he stormed into the bigger mosque and rained bullets down on the worshippers there. 20 people were killed in that mosque. The Bangladeshi cricket team, they were in fact entering that mosque to worship, and they saw what was unfolding, immediately fled. The smaller mosque, about 150 people were worshipping there, and 10 people had been killed. Throughout the afternoon, in my newsroom here in Wellington, we saw pictures of stretchers, streams and streams of stretchers of people being taken to Christchurch Hospital. I think there were about 50 patients that were taken there. The Prime Minister did also confirm that 20 people are seriously injured, and 4 people apprehended, but 3 people were apprehended in connection to the attack.
Thank you for that, Kushla Norman, a journalist in New Zealand, joining us there on the line from Wellington. Thank you very much for all those updates that you've been giving us throughout the morning. Let's show you now a map, a Google map of where these attacks happened in Christchurch. This is happening on the southern island of New Zealand. Of course, the first attack happened at the Al Noor Mosque in Christchurch, and the second one at Linwood Mosque. The 2 mosques, as you can see on that map, are very close to each other. Al Noor Mosque is the main mosque in the city centre, and this was a mosque that was built in 1985, and it's a main mosque in Christchurch, and Linwood Mosque is not far from it. 40 people killed, according to Australia's Prime Minister, New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. Here's what she said about the attacks just a short while ago.
It is clear that this can now only be described as a terrorist attack. From what we know, it does appear to have been well planned. 2 explosive devices attached to suspects' vehicles have now been found, and they have been disarmed. There are currently 4 individuals who have been apprehended, but 3 are connected to this attack who are currently in custody. We, New Zealand, we were not a target because we are a safe harbour for those who hate. We were not chosen for this act of violence because we condone racism, because we're an enclave for extremism. We were chosen for the very fact that we are none of these things, because we represent diversity, kindness, compassion, a home for those who share our values, refuge for those who need it. And those values, I can assure you, will not and cannot be shaken by this attack.
Well, as you heard there from New Zealand's Prime Minister, one of the suspects arrested was an Australian national. 4 people have been arrested, one of them an Australian national. Information that was confirmed earlier by Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison.
We grieve, we are shocked, we're appalled, we are outraged, and we stand here and condemn absolutely the attack that occurred today by an extremist, right-wing, violent terrorist that has taken the lives, stolen the lives, in a vicious, murderous attack that has claimed so many New Zealanders. This attack reminds us of the evil that is ever present and would seek to strike out at any time. And I particularly want to convey my heartfelt sympathies not only to all of the New Zealand people, as I'm sure all Australians would join me in doing, but I particularly want to express my sincere prayers and thoughts for those New Zealanders, indeed Australians of Islamic faith today, who have been the subject of this vicious and callous right-wing extremist attack.
Australia's Prime Minister reacting there to the attacks in New Zealand, 2 attacks at mosques in New Zealand this Friday, which have killed 40 people and injured 20 others. New Zealand's Prime Minister calling them a terrorist attack. We will have more on this breaking news story out of New Zealand for you throughout the morning and the day here on Al Jazeera. Divya Gopalan will be with you very shortly. From me, Fuli Batibo, thank you very much for watching.
They were searching for sanctuary in Australia, but instead were detained for years on a Pacific island. Now 101 East follows the journey of 2 refugees as they forge a new life in North America. On Al Jazeera.
Hello again and welcome back. Well, here across the Levant, we are watching one storm in the eastern Med, and that's going to bring some rain all the way through Saturday across much of the area. Actually, the rain is going to be expanding from many locations. So here on Friday, you can see where the rain is located, anywhere from Turkey across parts of Lebanon as well. As we go into Saturday, that rain does expand. You can see how heavier it does get across much of that area. So for Aleppo, it's going to be a rainy day for you at 12 degrees. Beirut, rain in your forecast at 15 degrees as well. Jerusalem will also see some rain there. Well, here across the Gulf, we are going to be seeing some windy conditions, particularly on Friday for Doha. Now, the visibility will be coming down across much of the area sometimes during the day, but by the time we go towards Saturday, things do get better. Temperatures come up to about 26. In Abu Dhabi, we do expect to see a temperature there of 27 degrees for you. And then here across Mozambique, of course, we have been following the storm system that is making landfall in Mozambique, bringing very heavy rain and flooding conditions across much of the area. That is going to continue on Friday, and the system is going to weaken, but still bring some very heavy rain across much of the area as we go towards Saturday. Down here towards the south, though, it is drying out across parts of southern Africa. For Durban, it is going to be a warm day for you at 29, and for Johannesburg, a temperature of 28.
At least 40 people die in Christchurch in New Zealand after shootings at 2 mosques.
You may have chosen us, but we utterly reject and condemn you.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern denounces those responsible. 4 people are in custody. Hello and welcome. I'm Divya Gopalan. You're watching Al Jazeera live from Doha. Let's go straight to our top story. It is 8 p.m. in Christchurch, New Zealand, the scene of what Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has called a terrorist attack. It's the worst the country has ever seen. We now know that gunmen have killed at least 40 people during Friday prayers at 2 mosques in the city. The first attack took place at the Al Noor Mosque, that's in central Christchurch, where 30 people were killed. Police confirmed a second shooting at the Linwood Mosque, that's a short drive away from the first one. 10 people were killed there. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern spoke a short while ago, and she's been meeting with police chiefs and security intelligence officials in Wellington. She has addressed the nation in the past hour.
It is with extreme sadness that I tell you that as at 7 p.m. tonight, We believe that 40 people have lost their lives in this act of extreme violence. 10 have died at Linwood Avenue Mosque, 3 of which were outside the mosque itself. A further 30 have been killed at Deans Avenue Mosque. There are also more than 20 seriously injured who are currently in Christchurch A&E. It is clear that this can now only be described as a terrorist attack. From what we know, it does appear to have been well planned. 2 explosive devices attached to suspects' vehicles have now been found and they have been disarmed. There are currently 4 individuals who have been apprehended, but 3 are connected to this attack who are currently in custody. One of which has publicly stated that they were Australian born. These are people who I would describe as having extremist views that have absolutely no place in New Zealand and in fact have no place in the world. While we do not have any reason to believe at this stage that there are any other suspects, we are not assuming that at this stage. The Joint Intelligence Group has been deployed and police are putting all of their resources into this situation. The Defence Force are currently transporting additional police staff to the region. Our national security threat level has been lifted from low to high. This, I want to assure people, is to ensure that all our agencies are responding in the most appropriate way. That includes at our borders. Many of you will have seen that Air New Zealand has cancelled all turboprop flights out of Christchurch tonight and will review the situation in the morning. Jet services, both domestically and internationally, are continuing to operate. I say again, there is heightened security. That is, of course, so we can assure people of their safety, and the police are working hard to ensure that people are able to move around their city safely.
That was New Zealand Prime Minister. And now Victoria Gatenby gives us the latest roundup of the story unfolding so far.
Injured people are rushed to hospital. They were gunned down during Friday prayers at Al Noor Mosque in the centre of Christchurch.
Yeah, but what happened, he came one side because the mosque has segments, no? And he came this side, he shoot this side, he went to another room, shoot there, there's a ladies section, he went and shoot them. And I just had one of the ladies that died. I know, I'm just hoping that that is not right.
Witnesses say the gunman was a white male. He was wearing military-style clothes and a helmet with a camera.
I was hearing that shooting after shooting after shooting. It went on about 6 minutes or more, and I could hear screaming and crying, and I saw some people were, drop dead.
Linwood Mosque, about 10 minutes drive away in another part of the city, was also attacked shortly after the shooting at Al Noor. Police say they have suspects in custody, but there may be more on the loose. They're warning people to stay away from mosques across New Zealand.
We are pouring resources into that area. Every available Canterbury and staff member and people nearby, other emergency services also, saturating that area with visibility to ensure that everyone who needs to get home can get so safely.
New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said this is one of her country's darkest days.
There is no place in New Zealand for such extreme acts of unprecedented violence. The people who were the subject of this attack today, New Zealand is their home. They should be safe here. The person who has perpetrated this violent act against them, they have no place in New Zealand society.
This footage published online reportedly shows a suspect being arrested after the shootings. Police say they've also found bombs attached to several cars, which have now been disabled. Victoria Gatenby, Al Jazeera.
Mohammed Jama was the head of the mosque, Al Noor Mosque, and he gave an account of his encounter with the shooter.
The time is 1:40 p.m. the area in front near the gate, first gate, and he coming to pass one person, and he have short man, 160 meters, and he have helmet, and he have given the glasses, and he's a dress of the military, and he's gun, machine gun of the M16 plug one, and it's a seat belt of the another gun, bullet, and he pass. I say, hey, what are you doing? And not talk me. He looking and not talk me. He is starting. He starting shooting, and the people of the changing the shoes and the shooting, and me, I'm running. That's after that he go the inside and he go one by one. Everybody killing, and some people died.
Well, Jamie Gough is a Christchurch City Councillor, and he joins us on Skype from Christchurch. Thank you very much for speaking to us, particularly in this very tense time in Christchurch. Firstly, could you give us any more details or any update on the investigation or what's happened since? We've heard from the Prime Minister. Is there any new information on the investigation that you know of?
No, look, details have been sketchy, so I've been learning just as much as the rest of the world has at the same time. Same with my councillor colleagues, same as the Mayor. It really has been a moving feast. The Prime Minister obviously described it as, you know, New Zealand's darkest hour, and I would most certainly concur with that. But we've been learning as we've gone. It originally began that we thought that 9 were dead, then it heard that it could be dozens, and just recently we've heard that it could be up to 40. So it's just horrifying. And in a place like New Zealand, where we pride ourselves as being, you know, one of the safest places in the world.
That's right, and everyone who's spoken has made a point of saying that this is unprecedented. Can you give us a sense of your reaction to this and the reaction of your community?
Absolutely horrified. You know, I think everyone's walking around in a daze. It was 8 years ago that we went through a devastating earthquake. People are still feeling the effects of that, whether it be physically or even insurance issues, which still drag on today. So this community, this city, the second largest city in New Zealand, has been through a tremendous ordeal 8 years ago, of which they're still feeling the effects of. So to go through this, a mass terror attack, you know, absolute acts of the most disgusting violence you could ever imagine is just horrifying in a place that we pride ourselves on our love, on our tolerance, and our community spirit. So I think everyone is just absolutely gobsmacked.
Can you give us an idea of how things, given this security situation right now, how people are feeling, the insecurity now surrounding the city?
Look, I think people have dawned on the fact that New Zealand will never be the same again. I think national security will never be the same again. The way that perhaps we've been blasé about things in the past, and you look and you say, well, okay, it's in America or in parts of Europe. But I think there's always been this unwritten belief that it just doesn't happen in New Zealand. People don't want to say that because they don't want to jinx it, but I think everyone that's visited our country feels that way. So, you know, as an elected representative of our city, it's just absolutely staggering that we could witness, you know, such scenes of hate and violence like that in, you know, a particularly tolerant country and peaceful city like Christchurch. So everyone is, I think, still in disbelief. I think at the moment they're wanting to be with their families. They're giving their kids a big hug and a kiss. I have a young 18-month-old son and a heavily pregnant wife at the moment. We're at home and we're just glad that we haven't been caught up in this. But school children have been in lockdown, so a lot of people, all public buildings, our Christchurch City civic facilities have all been locked down, and only recently has that been lifted. So only now there'll be children coming home to their parents, and I hope they're getting a lot of love from their parents.
Now, your Prime Minister has made it a point to say that New Zealand has always been a safe place for immigrants. Are you concerned that this feeling could change, particularly with immigrant communities having been targeted in this attack?
Look, I think that is inevitable, but I think we also need to be cognizant of the fact that there are bad people everywhere. No one is immune to that. I don't think that New Zealand is necessarily more dangerous today or tomorrow in a general sense than what it was yesterday. There are just 4 individuals, as far as we are aware currently, that are just downright evil, down to the bone. One of them was Australian, 3 others unsure where they're from, but unfortunately
this isn't indicative of humanity. Unfortunately, there are just some people like this, and unfortunately, they struck Christchurch today, and the community has been rocked by this, and it will never be the same again.
Indeed. And what can you tell us about the Muslim community in Christchurch?
Well, we have a large number of immigrants and particularly Muslims that come here, and ironically, they love Christchurch, they love New Zealand because it's a safe, free, tolerant country and city. So we have a large immigrant population. I'm sure that this will have shaken them to the core, but it's not just isolated to this community. Building on the tolerance of it, I think we're all interconnected, and Muslims, it doesn't matter what race or creed anyone is. These are our brothers and sisters within our local community, and we feel for them, and we're absolutely devastated for them. Embarrassed that this has happened, but still so unclear about where to from here. So this is just a matter of hours after it's happened. People are coming to terms with it. I think there's a new normal from here on in.
And as a city councillor, what message do you have for the people in Christchurch?
My message right now, particularly, look, I'm a father first and foremost, and I'll have number two very, very soon. So I would say cherish life, cherish your family. If you have your family with you right now, you're incredibly lucky, because there are 40, perhaps more people whose lives have just been torn apart. But I think remain vigilant. I think don't go out and about needlessly. Don't go down to have a look. Common sense stuff. But we don't know if this is over now. You just have no idea. I remember thinking back to the 2011 earthquake. That was actually a follow-on from what we thought the big one was back in 2010. So not necessarily drawing parallels to a natural disaster like that, but we just don't know where the end of this is. So I think people need to be smart, be cautious, stay with your family, and I would head out and about needlessly if you didn't have to. Just be vigilant.
Jamie Gough, Christchurch City Councillor, thank you for taking the time to speak to us.
My pleasure.
Leanne Dalziel is the Mayor of Christchurch, and he says the community is in shock.
But this has been a shock to a city that has been through so much already, and it's just I'm shocked beyond words. I cannot think of the right words to say, but I do want to offer people some reassurance, which is the police are doing absolutely everything that they can. I'm absolutely confident about that, and they are seeking to get the matter under control. And as soon as they are in a position to say that they have got the matter under control, then we will be able to end the lockdown of our facilities and the buildings in the central city. This has come as a complete bolt from the blue. If you'd said to me I'd be having a conversation about this, this sort of incident in Christchurch at some stage, at any time, I would say that it would be unbelievable. But actually, I'd say the same for the whole of New Zealand. Just that it feels like it's just not what would happen in a place like New Zealand, and so that's why it's been such a shock to so many people. Well, I haven't been advised on any white supremacist groups at all. So in the entire time that I've been the Mayor of Christchurch, and I would have thought that if the police had concerns in that regard, then I would have known about it. At the moment, we are responsible, obviously, for our own facilities, and like everyone else, following the instructions of the police. This is a police incident, and they are in charge, and we are just doing everything that we can to provide, support and responding to their requirements as far as the lockdown goes.
Earlier, you spoke to Tahir Nawaz. He's the president of the International Muslim Association of New Zealand. And from Wellington, he told us the effect of the attack on the community.
Basically, the whole community is in shock. We are not, we would never expect anything like this in this country. We're a peaceful country, And we have, and the result of that, we are restricting our activities in the mosque, and we're trying to keep the safety in our area. As for the information I received, that it happens inside the mosque, and it happens in 2 different mosques in Christchurch. At this stage, we are not clear that why this incident has occurred. It could be a various reason. It appears to be some opinion of the community is that just because one of our Kiwi Muslim was involved, and he was recently was very noticed in the media that was present in Syria, and it might one of the reasons that has sparked. But at this stage, having said that, we can't say that that was the reason, but it could be any other reason behind it.
Okay, let's update you on the latest information we have so far. New Zealand's police chief has confirmed that 40 people are dead after mass shootings in 2 mosques. 4 people are in custody, but there may be more on the loose. Australia's Prime Minister confirmed that one of them, or one of the suspects, is an Australian citizen. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has called it a terrorist attack. Well, the New Zealand Police Chief Mike Bush has spoken about the arrests.
4 are in custody, 3 are men, and 1 are woman. 1 is a woman, as I understand it. It's moving quite quickly, so I need to frame that in that way. That's what we believe at this moment.
Do we know anything about motivation at this point?
Not conclusively. We're working our way through that as well.
Can you classify as this a terrorist attack?
We are still looking at the circumstances that surround that. It doesn't get any more serious in this country.
Are you aware there's a video on social media circulating about the attack?
I'm absolutely aware. I have seen social media footage. It's very disturbing. It shouldn't be in the public domain, and we're doing everything we can to remove it.
How did you apprehend the attackers?
The attackers were apprehended by local police staff. There's been some absolute acts of bravery. I'm hugely proud of our police staff, the way they responded to this. But let's not presume that the danger is gone. So we want to make sure that we're right across that community. We're as visible and equipped as we need to be to make that happen.
There were reports of a car bomb. Can you tell us more about that?
I can tell you that there were a number of IEDs attached to vehicles that we also stopped. They've been made safe by the Defence Force, but that does go to the seriousness of this situation.
Is it right that that first known attacker was arrested wearing wide explosives?
That person has been made safe. We're still working through that, but we believe there was a claim, but that person is absolutely safe.
Is that an indication that there might be up to 9 suspects? Can you confirm that?
No, I can't confirm that. I can confirm that our staff have arrested 4 people. I won't assume there aren't others, but I don't have information to that effect.
The people who have been apprehended, were they known to police?
I can't go into that detail either. That detail will unfold in the next few days. That's all I can say at this stage, but I'm absolutely conscious that the public need to be informed, kept informed of this. We have, to my left, a host of communication staff who will make that happen. But as you can imagine, we have so many operational staff that are absolutely committed to this operation.
A source says police are going to be armed, have been instructed to be armed for the next wee while. What can you say about that?
Of course, our staff will have access, immediate access to the equipment they need to keep themselves and the community safe.
Are officers outside Christchurch being armed as well?
Yes, we're not assuming that this is contained to Christchurch. We have no other information to suggest it is, but at this point in time, we should never make assumptions.
And we're expecting to hear from New Zealand's Police Chief Mike Bush within the next hour with more on the latest situation. But for now, we're taking a very quick break, but we'll be back with more of the day's news.
Hello again and welcome back to your international weather forecast. Well, the winds have been a big problem here across parts of the UK over the last several days. And unfortunately, as we go into the weekend, we're expecting to see those winds continue. Now, we may see a little bit of a break between systems, but unfortunately, the trend through the weekend is going to be stormy and windy from much of the northwest. Let's put this into motion. I'm going to show you as we go from Friday to Saturday, those winds continue across much of that area as well as into northern Europe. But what we're going to be seeing is a nice change down here towards the south. Anywhere across parts of southern Europe and into central Europe, we are going to be seeing some very nice conditions, sunny skies, and temperatures are coming up. So by the time we go from Saturday to Sunday, a lot of this high pressure that's dominating is going to be making its way over here towards the east. Well, we are going to be seeing some stormy conditions here across the eastern part of the Med. That's all dealing with the storm that's been bringing a lot of rain across parts of Turkey, over here towards the western part of Levant as well. We're going to be seeing some winds along the coast here across parts of Libya as well as into Egypt. We could even see a rain shower or two in those storms, but we do think things are going to get better as we go towards Saturday. And speaking of better weather, it's going to be quite nice across much of the northwest. Algiers is going to be a very sunny day for you at 22, and Tunis at about 23 degrees for you.
Egypt's first democratically elected president, ousted and held incommunicado since 2013. Events shrouded in secrecy saw power change hands as the military seized control from its commander-in-chief. For the first time, Al Jazeera reveals exclusively what happened behind closed doors, directly from those who witnessed it firsthand. Morsi, the final hours on Al Jazeera.
Hello again, you're watching Al Jazeera, and here's a reminder of our top stories this hour. There have been mass shootings targeting 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand. At least 40 people have been confirmed dead, 4 suspects have been arrested, and one of them is confirmed to be an Australian citizen.
It is clear that this can now only be described as a terrorist attack. From what we know, it does appear to have been well planned. 2 explosive devices attached to suspects' vehicles have now been found and they have been disarmed. There are currently 4 individuals who have been apprehended, but 3 are connected to this attack who are currently in custody.
And witnesses described what happened inside the mosque.
Yeah, but what happened, he came one side because the mosque has segments, no? And he came this side, he shoot this side, he went to another room, shoot there, there's a ladies section, he went and shoot them. And I just had one of the ladies that died. I know, I'm just hoping that that is not right.
Suddenly, the shooting started. So it started in the main room, because the shooter must have come through the hallway, and I was in the side room, so I did not see who was shooting, but I saw that some people were running out through my room where I was in, and also I saw some people had blood on their body, and some people were limping. At that moment, I realized that it was really serious, and a couple of people, they said to me that you are on wheelchair, you got to get out now. So I tried to get out, and I pushed myself at the back where my car was parked, and I was behind the car. And then from there I was hearing that shooting after shooting after shooting. It went on about 6 minutes or more, and I could hear screaming and crying, and I saw some people were drop dead.
Okay, we can get more of the latest from Laura Tupu, who's a journalist at Newshub and joins us on the phone from Christchurch. Laura, good to speak to you. Can you bring us up to date as to what's happened or what new information has come out in the recent hour?
Yes, the Prime Minister has held a press conference, Jacinda Ardern. She's confirmed 40 people have been killed after this coordinated shooting at 2 mosques in Christchurch. 30 were killed at one, the Masjid Al-Noor, and 10 at the other. Police say there were also 2 bombs attached to 2 of the suspects' vehicles as well. Police have 3 people in custody at the moment, and the Prime Minister said none of these people were on any terrorist watch list that we have. 48 patients are at the local Christchurch hospital, ranging from young children to adults with gunshot wounds, and their injuries range from minor to critical. More people had gone to community health facilities as well. Witnesses have told us they saw bodies on the ground covered in blood at the mosques. They said they saw a shooter who was wearing military gear, a helmet, and holding a high-powered machine gun. And now this man had a 17-minute-long video of the shooting. It was reportedly live-streamed, and we understand many internet providers are trying to take down any video of that is online. None of the people who have died have been identified at this stage, and the Prime Minister says it's one of our darkest days and the worst massacre in living memory in New Zealand.
And Laura, what are police saying those who have been affected, or those in the telling those in the area, telling them what to do, whether to remain indoors? Is there still a sense of a security threat?
Yeah, and when this occurred for the following sort of 3 to 4 hours, the whole city was in lockdown. Because this happened on a Friday afternoon local time, so all the schools were in lockdown. That's since been lifted, so people have been able to go home. But around the mosques itself, there are still cordons in place, and there are hundreds of people gathering, family members of people who believe their loved ones were at the mosque, just looking for any information possible. Police say those people can be there because there are social workers to talk to them, there are police there to talk to them, but anyone who isn't related to anyone who may have been caught up in this should remain at home.
And what kind of reaction has there been from the community? I'd imagine, the media, of course, must be covering this extensively in New Zealand. What is the rhetoric, or what is the message that's coming out?
It's completely mind-blowing. This isn't something that happens here. This is something we see on the international news, and this is the man who we believe is responsible for this did write up a manifesto and posted it online saying he was a 28-year-old Australian. His manifesto was 37 pages long, and he said he actually chose to come to New Zealand because it would show the world that if this can happen in New Zealand, then this can happen anywhere. The Prime Minister said in a press conference recently that this gunman may have chosen New Zealand, but we never, ever chose him.
Thank you very much. That's Laura Tupu from Newshub, bringing us up to date on what's happening in New Zealand. Thank you. Now, in other news, Israel has launched airstrikes on Gaza after 2 rockets fell near Tel Aviv. Early morning explosions were reported in the besieged Gaza Strip, and Israel says it hit around 100 Hamas military targets. Okay, we can get more on this from Nida Ibrahim, who is live for us in Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. What other details can you tell us?
The Israeli army says that one of the areas it struck in the Gaza Strip belongs to Hamas's complex that is responsible for launching attacks in the West Bank and providing logistical support for them. That's according to the army, which also said that they struck an underground rocket manufacturing site in the Gaza Strip. Medical sources tell us that 2 Palestinians were wounded, a man and his wife, and we know that the wife's both arms were amputated after she was injured by shrapnel in Rafah.
Now, Nida, this is one of the largest escalations between Israel and the Palestinian territories we've seen in years. Is there any attempt to de-escalate at the moment?
We've heard from the sources close to the UN's peace process special coordinator for the UN, Nikolai Mlednov. He said that he was leading efforts to try and contain the situation by speaking to all parties, including the Israeli party. We also know that the Palestinian factions have told the Egyptians that they are not interested in a wild retaliation after what happened overnight in the Gaza Strip. We know that the Egyptian delegation has been in Gaza just before the situation has erupted there, and they have been, according to sources, discussing a long-term truce between Israel and the Gaza Strip.
That's Nida Ibrahim bringing us the latest on those airstrikes in Gaza. Thank you very much. We'll, of course, be updating. Thank you, Nida. We'll probably speak to you a little bit later again. Thank you. Well, those are the headlines. We will have plenty more here on Al Jazeera, and we'll, of course, be updating you on the situation in New Zealand. We expect to hear from the police commissioner in about an hour's time. We'll, of course, be bringing that to you live with all the latest lines on the investigation and what else reactions from there. As we've heard the Prime Minister speak, she said it is New Zealand's darkest day. The community is in shock and the whole country is in shock. We'll bring you up to date on that. But stay with us now for Inside Story.
For more than a decade, he's been considered a threat to national security in Russia.
Putin said, we'll give you the 12 indicted military intelligence officers indicted by Special Counsel Robert Mueller. But what we want in return is you, Bill Browder.
A multimillionaire investor in Russia turned anti-Putin activist talks to Al Jazeera.
From peaceful protest to civil war, Syria's president is still in power despite 8 years of conflict. What does the future hold and what hopes are there for peace? This is Inside Story. Hello again, I'm James Bays. 8 years ago this week, 15 Syrian teenagers were detained and tortured for spraying anti-government graffiti on a school wall. That was the beginning of an uprising that led to a civil war which continues to this day. Hundreds of thousands of people have been killed and it's created a huge refugee crisis. The UN and European Union are holding a donor conference in Brussels. They say they need $9 billion this year to help people trapped in Syria and support neighbouring countries hosting Syrian refugees. The EU's foreign policy chief hopes the meeting will help restart UN-backed talks to end the conflict. We'll bring in our guests in a moment, but first, this report from Priyanka Gupta.
Mass protests against President Bashar al-Assad began in Daraa in 2011. 8 years later, Syrians are back on its streets, still demanding Assad to step down and a statue of his father be brought down. What started as a peaceful uprising turned into a civil war. Rebels who took up arms to face the violent government crackdown and topple Assad are now largely confined to an enclave in Idlib province near the Turkish border. The Syrian army, backed by Russian warplanes, has been bombarding an area that was supposed to be protected by a ceasefire deal with Turkey. Dozens of people have been killed.
We had to get our children and families out of here because of the heavy bombardments. And since there are no hospitals, we are obliged to flee to the border areas, which are safer.
But the war is far more complicated than a battle between those who support or oppose Assad. Allies and foes of the Syrian government got involved, backing different groups. 2015 was a turning point when Russia intervened to back the Syrian army and tip the balance in Assad's favor. With the help of Iranian-backed fighters, he's now in control of almost two-thirds of the country, but key areas remain outside his grip. This includes the part of Syria that's most important to the economy, oil-rich areas to the northeast, mainly held by US-backed Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces. The SDF says it is nearing the end of an offensive they started in September to push ISIL out of its last remaining pocket in the town of Baghuz. The war seems to be winding down. President Assad has reversed most of the gains of the armed opposition. Several countries within the Arab League now appear to be ready to welcome Syria back into the fold. But the country is in ruins. Hundreds of thousands of people have been killed. Millions more are displaced. It will cost billions of dollars to rebuild the country. Nations who have entered Assad's turf are hoping to play a role in post-war Syria. Priyanka Gupta, Al Jazeera.
No one is keeping an official count of the number of deaths in Syria. The estimate from the UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights is at least 560,000 people have been killed. The UN says nearly 12 million people need aid, while 6.2 million people are internally displaced, and 5.6 million Syrians have left the country. Most of them are living as refugees, mainly in Lebanon, Jordan, Turkey, Iraq and Egypt. So let's start things off by getting the view from Damascus. And I'm joined by Talib Ibrahim, who is an analyst there in Damascus, knows the thinking of the government there. Talib, on this 8th anniversary of the start of the war, let me start with a really simple yes or no question. Do those around Assad now think he's won the war?
It is very difficult to answer in one word, but yes, the military part of the war, President Assad had won the military part. What about the other part, which is very much important? This is another story. We can talk about it later.
He has certainly survived. He's still in power, and yet he only controls 70% of the country. Much of the country is ruined. Could you not argue he's won the war but destroyed Syria?
No, President Assad didn't destroy Syria. It is a matter of big game inside Syria. This is an international struggle over Syria, over the whole Middle East. It is not a matter of democracy or freedom.
That if Assad had stood down, and if there had been then talks in Geneva, as the UN has been proposing, there might have been a way forward. Now you have a situation where you still have Assad in power, a man that most international lawyers and international human rights experts believe is a war criminal, a man who's committed crimes against humanity.
The majority of Syrian people in Syria are looking at that man as a hero who fought ISIS, who fought al-Nusra Front, and you are talking if Assad will step down, what is the alternative? She should be replaced by al-Nusra Front, by ISIS, by other terroristic groups.
If you look back to 2015, Assad was losing badly, wasn't he? Despite using his chemical weapons, despite using barrel bombs on the people of Syria. And it was Russian intervention that really changed things. That was the turning point, the summer of 2015. If we say that anyone had a victory in Syria, would you agree it was Vladimir Putin?
President Putin came to Syria not to fight for Assad, to fight for his own interest. It was a very good idea, the Russian intervention. But what about the Saudi intervention in Syria? They paid billions of dollars. What is about French intervention, British intervention, American intervention, Israeli daily intervention? All of them are intervening in Syria. Only Russia and Iran are prevented from playing any role in Syria, and others are allowed. This is not logical, and this is not rational to talk about. Yes, there is a very big game, and we are praying to God to make those parties, regional and international parties, raise their hands from Syria, and we are, as Syrians, we can find resolution for all of our problems.
Talib Ibrahim in Damascus, thank you. Let's discuss this further with our panel of guests who are joining us. And in Istanbul, we have Yahya al-Afridi. He's spokesman for the Syrian High Negotiations Commission, which is in opposition to Assad's government. In Washington, D.C., we're joined by Wael al-Zayat, former senior Syria advisor to the former U.S. ambassador to the UN, Samantha Power. And in New York, Richard Gowan, a senior fellow at the United Nations University. Yahya, if I can go to you first. You heard our interview from Damascus. I asked our analyst in Damascus a simple question. Had Assad won? What's your view?
I think if he is said to have won, it is a medal of shame, because who was your counterpart? Who did you win over? You won over a people. You won over a country, which is given to you as a trust to protect and to keep as a land and as a people. Actually, two things are facts about Syria. No going back to 2011 or before, and Assad did not win. And another thing, no life for this country, Syria, with the continuation of this regime. The basic thing that we are talking about here is the original slogan that started in Syria with this war against the people when they rose and said no against the regime. Actually, it is either I rule it or I ruin it. He ruined it, but he doesn't rule it.
OK, let me bring in Wael in Washington, D.C. As we stand here 8 years on, with no one really knows the true figure, but possibly 500,000 people dead, is this a textbook case of the international community completely failing the Syrian people?
The short answer is absolutely. The international community has watched this slow-moving train wreck with all the predictable consequences of displacement, death, destruction, and not only the empowerment of the current dictator Bashar al-Assad, but his regional backer Iran, the reemergence of Russia as at least a relative superpower, and obviously the scourge of terrorism multiplying in the form of ISIS, and who knows who will come after them.
Richard in New York, we mentioned Russia there. We mentioned when talking to our guest in Damascus that 2015 and the summer may have been a turning point in terms of Russian intervention. How important has Russia been, not just militarily, but where you are at the United Nations, using its blocking power?
Russia has undeniably won a very significant diplomatic victory over Syria at the UN.